purchasing power parity.
Purchasing power parity, have we started?
No,
Means we have to start with parity, international parity relations. Before that, we have discussed the foreign exchange market, how rates are quoted in the foreign exchange market, the concept of bid and ask and spread through triangular arbitrage, how to calculate bid ask spread of the currencies where direct quote is not available. So these things we have done. Now the important thing is forecasting of exchange rate. You all know that there are so many factors. Is it all? Yes. So there are so many factors which influence as far as determination of exchange rate is concerned. When we say $1 is 70.1234, how this figure we have arrived on? Second, what will be the future spot rate or what will be the future foreign exchange rate that many stakeholders are interested to know. And future always carries with itself uncertainties. So how to get rid of those uncertainties, because uncertainties, they create differences in the cash flows of a firm, variations in the cash flows of a firm. So how to manage that cash flow, how to streamline that cash flow, is there any way out? So we call it as management of risk or managing risk or simply hedging. So to forecast exchange rate, there are various parity relations which we should understand. One is, these parity relations are being given by Gustav Castle. One is based on inflation rate, other one is based on interest rate. The parity relations which are defined through inflation rate, we call them as purchasing power parity. And the parity relationship which is being defined through interest rate, we call as interest rate parity. So first we will take up what is purchasing power parity, what do we mean by that, the variants of purchasing power parity, and how exactly we can use purchasing power parity for forecast or projection of future exchange rate. So purchasing power parity has two versions, as the name itself suggests, purchasing power parity. Parity means equilibrium. It is not equal. Parity means equilibrium. There is difference between equal and equilibrium. Equal means perfect concurrence. Perfect concurrence, but equilibrium means in the given condition two things are similar. So we mean by that parity means equilibrium. Purchasing power parity means what my currency is able to purchase. Means if this duster we are able to purchase against 70 rupees, the same duster we are able to purchase back in US against $1. So as per purchasing power parity of these two currencies, the exchange rate will be established as $1 equal to 70 rupees on the basis of purchasing power parity of the currencies, purchasing power equilibrium of currencies. My currency, I am using 70 rupees to purchase one duster. US citizen is using $1 to purchase same duster. So the parity is 7 duster is the common thing. In terms of currency, $1 is equal to 70 rupees. So this version of purchasing power parity we call as absolute version of purchasing power parity. Absolute version of purchasing power parity. But you know that there are so many factors which influence exchange rate. The volatility in the exchange rate, the fluctuation in the exchange rate, there are numerous factors. Now if you want to calculate the relative importance of these factors, then you have to resort to multiple regression analysis. In that regression analysis, you can calculate the relative weights which are having influence on exchange rate determination. But we are not going into the detail of regression analysis. We will discuss separately. So one such factor is inflation. One such factor which influences exchange rate is inflation. Now let us see what is the role of inflation in exchange rate determination. Two countries which we are assuming, one is US, other one is India. Now in India, the rate of inflation happens to be more in comparison to US. If in India the inflation rate is, let's suppose, 10%. In US it is 5%. So it means the cost of duster, which was earlier 70 rupees in India, after inflation its cost will be 77 rupees. its cost will be 77, because in India the prices are increasing by 10%, and in US the prices are increasing by only 5%. So the cost of this duster back in US will be $1.05. So as per parity, as we have discussed earlier, that the exchange rate will be decided on the basis of purchasing power of the currencies, individual currencies. So new exchange rate will be 1.05 equal to 77. 1 point. Earlier the exchange rate was $1 equal to 70. So 1 was equal to 70. Now after inflation, the new exchange rate will be established on the basis of purchasing power parity as 1.05 equal to 77, means 1 is equal to 72 to 73. So this version of purchasing power parity, which we have tried to demarcate with the help of inflation as a factor, we call as relative version of purchasing power parity. We call as relative version of purchasing power parity. Why? Because it is in relation to, in reference to this exchange rate which we have got on the basis of absolute purchasing power parity. And we all know that in real world, absolute condition never exists. It is always relative conditions which exist. Relative means all other factors which influence the determination of exchange rate. One such factor is inflation. So what is happening here? In Indian currency, inflation rate is 5% more in comparison to US currency, US dollar. So the inflation rate differential is 5%. Now to what extent, what is the impact of this inflation on the new exchange rate? That is $1 is equal to 72.5 or 73. Indian currency is losing its value. Indian currency is depreciating by the same amount by which, almost by the same amount by which inflation rate differential is existing. Inflation rate differential is 5%. Indian currency is having more inflation by 5% in comparison to US dollar. So Indian currency is also depreciating by 5% more. So this is what we call as relative purchasing power parity. And why parity word is associated with relative word, that relative purchasing power parity. So what equilibrium we are talking of? When we are saying $1 is 70, $1 is 70. So if I am exporting, excluding the transaction cost, excluding other factors like transportation cost or capital control with countries exercise on inward outflow of funds, we are assuming that there are no such other factors. If we are exporting, if one exporter is exporting this duster back in US, now the landed price will be $1 or 70 rupees. The landing price of this duster in US will be either $1 or in Indian terms it will be 70 rupees. Correct? Now if we assume that exchange rate is not depreciating, exchange rate is not depreciating, means here Indian currency is not depreciating, it is depreciating from 70 to 72.5. Okay, it remains same, 70 rupees. Our assumption is that in spite of the inflation, in Indian currency it is 10%, in US currency it is 5%, the exchange rate is remaining same. So what will happen after increase in the price level? In international market, the price of, that is in US market, by an Indian exporter, the price of this duster is $1 or 70 rupees. Now after inflation, in India, the price of this duster will be 77. Will exporter be able to sell this duster at 70 in US market? Because indigenously the cost of input, raw materials, components, the price have increased. So that is why the new price is 77. Now you cannot survive at 70 rupees if you are selling it in foreign market. So it means what? Your equilibrium, exporter's equilibrium will be retained only when Indian currency is depreciating by the amount by which the prices have increased in Indian market. Now what is happening? If you are going to increase the price in international market, let's suppose from now 77. Now what is happening in US? The price of same duster is also increasing by 0.05. So the new equilibrium is 72.5. It means what? You sell this duster in US market at 73 rupees or $1. Okay? still you are having 4 rupee of loss. That loss will be mitigated when you will be bringing $1 in India and converting it into $, and at that time you will be getting this much of rate. This much of rate. What you are doing, you are converting $, into Indian currency, and this will be the new rate. So what we try to discuss in purchasing power parity is that parity means equilibrium. The exporter's compatibility should remain or it should be restored in light of increase in inflation in Indian currency. So if Indian currency is having more inflation, the exporter's compatibility in international market will go down because the prices of the same duster will go up. So exporter will not be able to sell. But that is equally cancelled or nullified or taken care by depreciation of Indian currency. Depreciation of Indian currency by the same amount by which the prices are increasing. And that depreciation is causing what? That depreciation of Indian currency is causing an increase in the profitability of the exporter. Why increase in the profitability of the exporter? Because the exporter is getting more Indian currency in comparison to the earlier case. 3 rupees that exporter will be getting more against the earlier case. So that ₹3 will exactly offset the increase in the price level of the duster in Indian market. So exporters equilibrium is achieved. Okay. So here we mean parity with equilibrium of the exporter's competency or compatibility in international market. So this is what relative version of purchasing power parity explains. Now with help of this version we can derive an equation with help of which we can forecast future exchange rate. Can we? Can we? Let us see. Earlier it was $1 equal to ₹70. $1 equal to 70. After inflation means 1 plus, let's suppose I dollar is inflation in US. It is equal to 70. 1 plus I Indian currency. I Indian currency means inflation in India. I rupee is inflation rate in India. Now if we assume that this is the future spot rate which we need to calculate F, 70 is the prevailing spot rate, 70 rupees is the prevailing spot rate, then we get a formula spot rate multiplied by 1 plus inflation rate in India divided by 1 plus inflation rate prevailing in US. Now this is for 1 year. This is for 1 year. Let's suppose you need to forecast exchange rate after 5 years. You need to forecast exchange rate after 5 years on the basis of inflation. And here we are assuming that all other factors remain constant. All other factors like interest rate, government policies or any other imperfections which are prevailing in the market, they are not present. Only inflation rate is there. So, and this inflation will be constant. Second assumption is that this inflation rate will be constant, it will not vary. So in that case, it is very simple to calculate. If you are going to forecast this future spot rate on the basis of current spot rate after n years. So this will be the new equation. Just add a power n. N means the number of years for which you are forecasting the exchange rate. So with this, we have tried to establish a relationship between future spot rate and the prevailing spot rate with help of purchasing power parity. Okay.